Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast.
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we are counting down our top 5 Disney characters of all time.
That's a lot of pressure. I really struggled with this.
To come up with 5? Like, to just pick 5?
Yeah, it was weird because I feel like I have a couple that are way up there, and then I feel like I have a pretty even plane of a lot of different characters. So, and then there's characters that I really like and have no really good reason for. So, and I'm going to bring them up probably eventually, but yeah, and it was hard. And then there's certain movies that I just really like. So I like a bunch of the characters. So to pick one from the movie was challenging.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, I actually struggled, I feel like, to come up with 5 because I feel like there's a lot of Disney characters that I know, and obviously there's a lot of good Disney characters, but for me to say they are my favorite Disney characters, there had to be something that was yes, I enjoy this character, I seek this character out if they're in the parks, that type of thing. So I almost struggled a bit to name 5. Now I'm sure I'm probably forgetting dozens of Disney characters,
Yeah.
and if somebody would name them, I'd be like, oh yeah, they're one of my favorite too. But yeah, it was interesting kind of putting the list together.
There's also some I intended actually before recording this to rewatch Zootopia, but I just didn't get around to it. And I'm pretty sure that Judy Hopps should probably be on my list, but I haven't seen Zootopia in so long.
All right, well, you're starting to give it away, so let's
forget.
Let's hold it. Let's hold off on that. So before we get into our top 5 characters here, let's cover the Disney news of the week. So Disney released the trailer for Moana 2. So we got our first teaser trailer for the new Moana movie.
Moana 2, Moana 1.
That's basically what it is. It from what the trailer says, and the movie's coming out in November of this year. Basically, from what the trailer showed, it seems like it's the exact same story essentially without Te-Fiti. It's Moana leaving her island. Apparently, they didn't learn that they can go sailing they made it seem at the end of the first one. Her going out on some adventure in the water because something's calling to her. She has a mission, and then she runs into Maui again. It doesn't seem like she's seen Maui in a while, and they go on this adventure and stuff happens, and it seems like it's exactly like Moana 1. Maybe that's because Moana 1 was so popular. Also, there was the reports that this originally was going to be a Disney Plus series. So, did they take a lot of little mini stories of her just traveling and adventuring and throw together into movie? So it'll be interesting. I put a poll out on our YouTube channel of are you excited about this movie? Yes or no? And actually 67%, 2/3 of the people said they are excited about this movie, which I was kind of surprised by because again, to me, it seems like it's just retreading Moana 1 a lot.
My one concern about the film is, so I actually really like series, and I think that the series are almost better. I understand Disney wants to probably make money off of this, but I think as a personal preference, watching a series as opposed to watching a movie, because I think that you can do so much more with character development, and it doesn't have to have this big sweeping adventure in a series for it to be entertaining. And that is sort of my concern about this movie, is that they are trying to distill a series into a movie without a main conflict that is going to be so threatening and so ominous that you get engaged and you care a lot. So I am really concerned about that because there was no hint at that. But then again, I think that there have been other Disney movies. I feel like Elemental is a good example. I feel like there were trailers for Elemental, and I was like, I don't know about this movie.
Yeah, they don't want to give too much away too soon either. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, whenever you have such a very complex complication, it's more of an internal complication as opposed to a bad guy threatening everyone. It's hard to kind of quantify that and put it on screen in a trailer. But I mean, obviously, I think Elemental is probably one of the best movies that Disney has produced probably ever, Disney Pixar. So I don't know. So maybe Moana has a lot of hope, but it is concerning.
And that's a good point because a lot of the Disney movies lately haven't had a standard villain like the Frozen movies. It is more of an internal struggle. There's not really necessarily a villain, and that is harder to portray. And so maybe, hey, for a first trailer, it's let's just show people what they love. They love Moana. They love Maui. she's back at sea. Like, let's just give them that. The one little piece that I did catch that it seems like maybe this is the storyline, maybe this is where they're heading, is she talks about like uniting her people across all of the oceans. And I kind of wonder, she had like a new outfit in one of the scenes, and I kind of wonder, like, are they setting her up to become a princess, more of like a princess, like an official princess, queen, something? There is kind of in the first one hints that she is a demigod herself, like some sort of deity. Do they step into that she now kind of just like unites all of the people in the ocean, and she is kind of becomes the ruler or the Maui, kind of the legend to all of these other people? That there's that little hint in there. So
here's my last question. Did Moana's parents have another kid?
It seems like it.
Because, yeah, they have a little baby. So it could just be in that particular scene that they had somebody else's child. But it's interesting. Like I like the fact that Moana's a little older and maybe gets a little sibling. I think that that's kind of a cool thing. And also something that you don't see portrayed a lot in media, where you have an older, like a much older sibling, and then the parents also have a younger sibling. But that's actually something that's relatively common in real life. I've like my students have that. I have that personally.
Yeah, you don't see that.
It's interesting
in the sequels, like the family expanding. Usually, it's the same kind of group.
Well, even in anything,
from one movie to another.
In anything, usually the siblings are relatively close together in age. There never is like a 10+ year gap.
But there's never like a new one. Like I feel like when in the 90s when Disney did like the direct to video sequels, like Ariel had a daughter. Like the princesses never seem to have a daughter. They never seem to get a sibling. Like it's the same group of people from one to the other. Now like Lion King again, but they were the direct to like VHS sequels where they have kids and stuff like that. So it is interesting that, to your point, even just that there is a new member of her family.
Potentially.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a new member of her family in the second one. So the other thing, talking about Walt Disney World, we are about a month away from the opening of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And surprisingly, Disney just released the entire ride video on their YouTube channel, like on all their social medias. They just released it, which I think this is the first time I remember that they've released the ride video for their own ride, and this is a month before it opens. So really interesting. I'll be curious to see if they do this going forward, because is this a shift in kind of their social media strategy? Instead of having influencers ride it and have them post it and get all kind of the likes and views for it, Disney's like, we're just going to cut out the middleman and post it ourselves. Are they worried that people aren't going to like this ride? Like, it just seems odd that they would show the entire ride before anybody can even ride it. Like, I could see once it's out, maybe you want to show it, but like, why do they feel like they need to show people this ride unless they're worried that they're getting, it's not getting the buzz that they thought it was going to get? And so bookings are light. People don't really seem to want to go. So they're like, hey, we need to get people excited. Let's just show them the whole ride, and maybe that will get them excited. Like, I'm not sure what the play of this is. And so that's what'll be interesting to see. Do they do this again? Was this just a one-off thing? But pretty amazing that they just like threw this out there for everybody to see before this ride's even open.
Yeah, I've seen some of it. I've tried to avoid some of it. I don't want to see a full ride video, but I have seen like the part where they get to the top of Splash Mountain. I saw the one what they posted where there was the old Splash Mountain going down the hill versus the new one, and a couple other ones.
Well, I think somebody else did that. I don't think that was Disney.
Was it?
It did
I don't
like
know.
the side by side.
Yeah, the side by side. I don't really know, but I've seen a few of the videos. But yeah, to me it seems like maybe it's like a hey, somebody else is going to get the views. Why not us? Like, why not?
I mean, they kind of did this too with the second video in this, like we call it Imagineering series. They talked about some of the songs, like they showed recording the songs for the new Country Bears Jamboree. It seems like there's going to be, I think Aladdin is one of the songs in there, and I can't remember the other one. So now they did not give all of the songs out, but they started talking about that. So again, it's a weird shift where it seems like they feel like they have to tell everybody this is exactly what you're getting before it happens, whereas before it was kind of like
a surprise.
Yeah, a surprise to see this.
I think it's good for tempering expectations and saying this is what it's going to be, so then the day that it comes out, it's not this buzz of, oh, they've sold out and they've done this and they've only done Disney IP or whatever. It's like, hey, look forward to there being Aladdin in the Country Bears Jamboree.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's an interesting shift. Pretty surprised when it came out. Like I thought when I saw it, I was like, oh, who posted this, and I saw it was Disney, and I just kind of blew my mind that they would just post this themselves out there. So really strange, but interesting to see what happens. All right, so let's jump into it here. Our top 5 Disney characters. So we each have our own top 5 here. This isn't a combined list. So Angela, I will let you start. That's why we have this board here. Everybody's probably been wondering, like, why is this cork board sitting here?
What happened to the beautiful fake plant?
That's new.
It's still there. It's just behind.
It's not fake. Don't tell people that.
Yes,
it's a real plant.
It's very real.
It lives perfectly without daylight. So we have the cork board here, and so Angela, I will let you start with your top 5.
Yeah, this is a good episode to be watching on YouTube. Listening on the podcast is great, but we do have some visuals this time. So I'm just gonna go right ahead and bring out my characters here. Don't mind the bag at all. So my number 5 favorite character is Jack Sparrow. You want to go ahead and
I can pin this for you.
Pin this up there for me. So I love Jack Sparrow just for the reason that he is funny. You never know what he's going to do. He has some of the most quotable and memorable lines in all of Disney anything. And he is just very entertaining. Now, I'm docking Jack Sparrow because I'm talking about Jack Sparrow from basically the first 3 movies. And I think that as the series goes on, he sort of becomes a bit more of a wayward character, not as funny. I don't know, they kind of lost their way with him.
The first movie was obviously his best.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Curse of the Black Pearl, that was the best movie of the Pirates series.
And of course, like, that was a movie meant to be made one of, and then they were like, oh man, these did so well, like, let's make more of them.
Right.
So, I mean,
and they're talking about making more. I mean, it's going to be a series that continues on. So
right, exactly. So I think he is great. I considered putting him up higher, but I think because of the length of the series, like, he was
diminished a bit.
He was diminished a bit.
You die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Speaking of that, my number 4, Anakin Skywalker. So Anakin is interesting for me. And I think a lot of people ding Anakin because, and I'm specifically really kind of talking about Anakin from the Clone Wars.
I was going to say you use the Clone Wars image of Anakin here.
Right. So I'm talking about Clone Wars cartoon Anakin. I'm, of course, going over into the live action movies, but because if you've watched 4, 5, and no, I'm sorry. Because if you've watched 1, 2, and 3, you
almost screwed up there.
I know. If you've seen, I mean, it's so hard because they're out of order. But
they were the 4th, 5th, and 6th ones,
right? To be released.
That's what you were saying.
That's
obviously,
exactly what I was saying. Obviously, but I mean, you get to see him as a young boy, as kind of a sort of a Jedi, sort of starting to lose his way, and then of course developing into the villain. But I really like the part where in the middle, where I feel like you get to know Anakin's motivations a lot. And I still think there's some things that are obviously missed in there. Like, I think that toward the end of Clone Wars, it kind of didn't get canceled, I believe. And
they finished it, though. I mean, they came back under Disney Plus and did the final season and wrapped it up.
But I feel like they were starting to show Anakin sort of going dark side, and then it seemed like there's a chunk of maybe missing episodes there where there's a little bit more motivation.
They kind of switched focus to Ahsoka.
They did.
Like they took it to the point basically where he turned, and then episode 3 kind of covered that. So the series kind of then turned and said, okay, let's see what Ahsoka was doing at that point and the clones were doing.
But what I love about Anakin is, I mean, and again, people say he's whiny. People say he's a know-it-all. People say a lot of stuff about him, and I could see those perspectives. But the thing I like about Anakin is I feel like Anakin is very much like he's a misunderstood kid, and I'm not giving him... I don't want to be permissive of what he turns into. Although some people might just argue that was the intent of the Force for him to go that way. So he really had no control in the whole matter. But I just think that the Jedi Order does such a bad job with him. And I feel like, if you are constantly treated like you're the bad kid, you're constantly treated with mistrust, what other option do you have but to then say, okay, obviously I can't earn these people's trust no matter what. Now, of course, Anakin always did everything better than the rest of the Jedi. He was always acting on his own. He always knew better than them but he knew better than them, and it usually turned out okay. So I just think he's a really interesting character. He did a great job with Ahsoka. He stood by her side. He was the only Jedi who stood by her side when she was accused of what she was accused of that ended up being Barriss. So, like, there's a lot of things on Anakin's side. Now, of course, there's a lot of things against him too, but he's just an interesting, complex character, and I think that's why I appreciate him so much.
Yeah, your first two are kind of
Anti-heroes,
anti-heroes, somewhat misunderstood. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I like characters like that because there's nuance to them. They're not all good. They're
more
not all
interesting.
bad. They are more interesting. And again, Anakin is just a really, really interesting character. And I think that you get a really good reason, like you get good interest, like interesting backstory. And then Anakin, obviously, everybody knows, grows up to become Darth Vader, who is one of the most iconic villains. So again, I like a good villain. And
you
Anakin
can't
grows
cheat.
into
You
that.
get one. It's Anakin. You don't get Darth Vader. Too,
I mean, they're the same person.
No, they're different. Okay.
Okay. So anyway, that's my number 4. My number 3 is Moana. So, and I really like how you picked a picture with Hey Hey on there because Hey Hey is my honorable mention for this. I was considering picking Hey Hey. I love Hey Hey's character design. I love how anti everything. Like Moana does a very good job of poking fun at Disney movies, and she herself is like this really interesting way of poking fun at Disney princesses. Hey Hey is poking fun at Disney sidekicks, and so there's something like very self-reflective about the character of Moana, and she's really one of the few Disney princesses that has a sense of humor. She shows fault. So she's very relatable. And I also relate to the fact that, you know, sometimes she doesn't feel like she fits into what she's supposed to be, which is, again, another theme of some of my picks. And you'll see in a second here, one of my other picks has a very similar theme here. But yeah, I really appreciate how Moana goes off and she does her own thing. I think the whole movie itself is beautiful. I think it has some of the cooler, like Tomatua. Love him as a villain. He's only in it for
again. Are
a
you
short period
picking
of time.
Moana or the movie? You got to get the character here. You're talking
I'm
Tomatua
talking about,
now.
I know, but I'm just saying Moana as a movie is
Let's
solid.
keep it Moana.
But Moana is she's very interesting in how, again, self-referential, like to Disney as a whole that she is, and again, how faulted
Don't
she
worry,
is in
Moana
many
2
ways.
is going to ruin it. She's going to fall off the list here. By
Stop
the
it.
end
Yeah,
of
I
the
know.
year.
She's gonna end up down there with Jack Sparrow, who when they
Right.
made too many movies with him.
Right.
Or maybe not. Maybe she'll go higher. Like,
I will say, good news is Hey Hey is in the second one, and it looks like Pua's coming on the adventure too.
yeah.
They're righting some wrongs in Moana 2. That's the only difference. Moana 2 is Moana 1 with Pua.
Well, a character that I didn't put on this list, so a little bit of a spoiler for 1 and 2, but a character that would have been raised by their sequel would have been, and I don't know which one of these two I would have picked, but Anna or Elsa.
Okay.
Because that is one of my favorite Disney movies, Frozen 2
Frozen
of all
2 was
time,
great,
and Frozen
right.
2 made them way better than Frozen 1. So maybe it'll do something like that. So moving on to my number 2 favorite character, this is the part where maybe I hopefully won't get emotional, but Mulan makes me emotional because I think, if you listen to, oh man, which one of the Bancroft brothers was that?
That was Tom Bancroft did
Yeah.
Mushu. Yeah.
If you listen to our episode with Tom Bancroft, I think I did actually kind of break down when talking about Moana, but
Mulan.
They both start with M's. So growing up, I felt kind of like a misfit toy because growing up in the 90s, I think that there was still a lot of like pushing girls to behave and act a certain way. And I was definitely more sporty, I would go out and like to play outside and like play in the mud. And I don't think there was quite the messaging around just be who you are that kids I think today maybe have a little bit more of. So I always felt like, you know, I wasn't enough of a girl because I didn't like to dress up. I didn't like to play with dolls and things like that. And the movie of Mulan was really important to me because I thought, you know, seeing her go out there and just do her thing and be herself and earn respect in a way that a lot of women didn't, I think that was inspiring to me. So Mulan is my number 2.
Well, what's going to be number 1? Who's beating Mulan?
Well,
That was a pretty...
it's a sentimental one for
Okay,
me too.
okay.
So my number one, if you couldn't tell from, the bag that I brought out, is Simba. So Simba is my number one, not only because I can pretty much do all of the Lion King off by heart, but also
Pretty much. It's terrible watching The Lion King with you because you say all of the words
no,
I'm not second before they...
I'm not that
before
good
they say
anymore.
Okay. Well, last time we watched it, you were.
I mean, I know like the beginning and I know some parts, but I don't know all of it anymore. But I love Simba because, again, talk about a nuanced hero. Simba, when he starts off, he's kind of a cocky young child, and then he has to grow up really fast. He loses his father, and then he thinks it's his fault, and he has to learn a whole new mantra. But and then he runs away from his responsibilities and has to kind of come back. And as an adult, I've found a lot of relatability in Simba that I just liked Simba as a child. It just, like, I thought he was cute. I liked that he was an animal. Like, obviously he gets upgraded just because he's an animal. And I like animal movies better than people movies. But also, I relate to him in a lot of ways, losing my father and like kind of feeling like I have guilt behind that. And so he is very similar, and then he has to kind of look and like learn responsibility. And I think that's a really good, interesting message. He has to grow up and learn that, things aren't always fun. You don't always get to do what you maybe want to do, but you sometimes have to do what you have to do. And so I think that Simba is really relatable, especially to adults. And I think that just overall, he's adorable. Just look at him. He's an adult Simba. He's good looking.
I'm surprised you didn't go with live action Simba.
Oh, please.
No, you got a solid list there. I mean, it's a good mix of, like classic Disney animation, modern Disney animation.
Mm-hmm.
You have Star Wars. You have, Pirates, which is just live action Disney in general. That's a solid mix.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, with Simba is Scar. I have to say that. But Scar,
again, every one of you pick. So Simba, you're pulling Scar in. Moana, you're pulling in Hey,
Mulan and
Mushu. Yeah, Mulan and Mushu. You're pulling in Tomatua with
Hey.
Moana and Hey. Anakin. Then you're trying to say Darth Vader in there. The only one you really didn't mention was Jack Sparrow. I'm surprised you didn't bring in like Will and Elizabeth and Davy Jones and all these. He's the only one that's just Jack Sparrow. So no, I mean I think that's a solid list. I don't think I would put any of them on my 5. I mean, I definitely like you obviously, like you mentioned with Mulan, that's like a more personal connection. I definitely would not, based on these 5, I would not have Mulan that high. I probably would have, I probably would have Jack Sparrow near the top. I think Jack Sparrow, Simba, those are probably like 1, 2. And then I think Moana at 3 solid. And then Anakin, and maybe Mulan. Like that's maybe how I'd flip them. But yeah, overall, I think a really solid list.
Thank you very much. I can't wait to see yours.
All right, so we'll get into my top 5 here. So again, like I mentioned at the top, I struggled a little bit, I feel like, to kind of come up with the list. But after I thought about it a while, and I feel like pretty like I got a good solid 5 here. And I think like you, I have kind of a wide variety across different fandoms in Disney and different kind of animation, live action, like a good mix here, so we didn't kind of keep anything. So starting with number 5 on the list, I have essentially any Alan Tudyk role. So I have Alan Tudyk at number 5.
I mean, he is a very solid voice actor.
So we talked about Hey. So you mentioned Hey. You basically had Hey at 3.5, I think is what we've settled on. But Hey, King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph, Valentino from Wish. Also, he was K2SO in Star Wars. He was Duke Weaselton. Well, Duke Weaselton.
I was gonna say, you said Duke Weaselton.
Yeah, in Zootopia,
no.
Duke of Weselton.
Yeah. You're right.
Frozen. Right. So he's been in countless Disney movies. And again, like when I was coming up with my list, I was thinking about characters of like what characters do I want to see in the parks, like seek out to see? What characters do I remember most from like movies and that, or do I have a connection with, or, like kind of laugh at and are memorable? And I feel like all of the Alan Tudyk roles are just like the most memorable roles. And I think now that he's been in so many Disney animated movies, like he's basically in every movie, it's now kind of taken on this life of its own of like, who's Alan Tudyk playing in this? and it's just amazing where you have somebody that is the caliber of Alan Tudyk. Like he can voice people. I mean, he was King Candy. Like he spoke. That was like a normal
human. He went
human.
to Juilliard.
Yeah. And then he plays a chicken, or like he plays a goat. He was Tuk Tuk too in
Raya the Last Dragon.
So like he plays all of these animals that just make noises. And then, whenever he gets to talk, it's like a treat. And so you're just always looking for that. Like, okay, who's Alan Tudyk going to play? And it's just always a funny character. And it's just hilarious knowing that they could have literally got anybody to make a chicken noise, but they hired Alan Tudyk to be the guy making the chicken noises. And if you've ever seen the videos of him, like in the studio, like doing, like he goes all out with his performances. So basically any Alan Tudyk role is my number 5 pick.
I would love to see Hey Hey in the parks. If they can do Kevin, I feel like they can do Hey Hey. Just a giant Hey Hey.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. Like, they do that a lot with, like, some of these characters where, like, they are, like, Stitch. Stitch is not that big in real life. Now, Kevin is that big, but they need, and they're working on, like, they showed that, like, Baby Groot robot, and they have, like, the little walking robots around Galaxy's Edge now at Disneyland. Like, they are working on smaller in-park animatronics, but something like a Hey, like, that would be cool. Like, Baby Groot, Hey Hey, make them more, like, life proportional, because it's always just weird whenever it's like, hey, there's that character, they were 2 feet in the movie and now they're 7 feet tall in real life. It's kind of like, let's get them the right size here. All right, so my number 4 pick, it's a little bit of a cheat, kind of like you're going with 2 people, but I have Chip and Dale. They come as a pair though.
All right, I will allow it.
So for me, Chip and Dale, this is one, it's kind of like an emotional pick of, it's just them in the parks. I feel like it's more the park characters. I mean, not necessarily, I haven't watched all of the Chip and Dale cartoons. The new Rescue Rangers movie came out. I liked it. I know you didn't really care for it. There
are parts that were good.
The animation style of it and stuff, but I've seen some of the shorts and stuff, like when you're going to Disney, like on the Magical Express, or like whenever you're on like Disney Transportation, sometimes they play that. But for me, it's the park interactions, like the playfulness of Chip and Dale, how well they are together as a pair, separate, how well they interact with us, and it's consistently always a great interaction.
I think that they are consistently probably better next to Donald Duck, who I didn't put on my list now that I thought about it, but next to Donald Duck, I think that they are a must-see over like Mickey Mouse.
100%.
Like Donald usually gives you a really good interaction, particularly if you shower him with love and affection. Chip and Dale, I will say maybe even more consistently, they find something to be playful about. I agree with you on that. They are a really good pick.
I also think they're on the list because when I was younger at Walt Disney World, Chip and Dale rescued me. Not the Chip and Dale you're thinking of, not these guys, but the actual people named Chip and Dale. We rented, I was like 7 or 8, and we rented one of those boats that you can rent, and went out on the water, and the boat died. And so cast members had to come get the boat restarted, and they were named Chip and Dale. And so maybe that's why I love Chip and Dale, because from a young age that was imprinted in my memory that Chip and Dale were cool people.
Do you think that they were actually named Chip and Dale, or that they just didn't want to use their real names, or their real names were more complicated than that?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like cast members, when they have their name badges, like they don't lie on those. Like I feel like that's their name, right? Like, are they allowed to wear fake names down there?
I don't know.
I think
If there's anybody who's a cast member,
I think their names
let
really
us
were
know
Chip
if
and
you
Dale.
are allowed to go by a fake name.
Yeah, so I think they really were Chip and Dale. So Chip and Dale saved me. They were the rescue rangers that day, and then that's why I think
I thought
Chip
it was the
and
actual
Dale,
characters that rescued you. This really ruins the story.
No, it was people named Chip and Dale, but they did rescue me. So I think that's why I have an affinity for them. And then now as an adult, just the interactions with them, they're the best interactions in the park character wise.
Was it a rescue, or did they forcibly remove you guys from the park? Because if you were stuck there, you wouldn't have to leave.
It wasn't in the park. It was it was the boats you can rent, and you're on the waterway, you're on the Seven Seas Lagoon. Like you can rent boats at the Polynesian, or at like the boardwalk. I don't know exactly where we were.
I thought you were in park. Okay.
No, you can't rent boats.
This story
in the
is
park.
getting lamer by the second.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you can't rent boats in the park. Yeah, it was outside, but just the engine died, and so they had to come help us. So yeah, from a young age, I think that just got me started on Chip and Dale. All right, and so my number 3 pick, we're going with Star Wars, and I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to get demonetized because it's not going to be close, but we're going Mando. That was supposed to be the Mandalorian noise. There you go. That's better. I didn't want to do it too good because then that's much better. We would have gotten flagged if I would have done it too well. So, but the Mandalorian, and wanted to have somebody from Star Wars on here because I think Star Wars is a big part of the Disney fandom. And I think the Mandalorian is such an important character because he's almost single-handedly, I feel like, revitalized Star Wars to a certain extent. I feel like, Disney, they had their trilogy. I think it started off really strong with The Force Awakens, with Rey and Kylo Ren. I think those were 2 really good characters. I think they kind of fumbled 8 and 9 and lost some of the goodwill they had with the fans, and it seemed like they kind of didn't really know where they were going forward, and they were struggling a little bit. Star Wars was with the movies. Obviously, like you talked about the Clone Wars, like the animated series, obviously we're doing well. But
I feel like that is definitely something that was more niche, and people haven't watched that as much. Like we hadn't watched it. And I think that there's still a lot of people that have a hard time with the buy-in of I'm going to watch a cartoon to learn about Star Wars.
Right. But The Mandalorian, he was the first live action series for Star Wars on Disney Plus. Basically the first main Disney Plus show that kind of got everybody hooked on Disney Plus. But I feel like it's opened up Star Wars to like a larger audience, and it's got people kind of excited about Star Wars and going like, okay, this is what, like, Disney's doing this right. Like, this is Star Wars correct. Like, build out the story, build out the world. Don't just kind of retread old themes with the movies. Like, let's get away from the Skywalkers. Let's start getting new characters. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with The Mandalorian. You know what I mean? Like, when you watch the movies, X, Y, and Z is going to happen because what happens to Luke and Leia and all of them. You don't know what's going to happen with him. And they're starting to spread it out. And it's amazing that a character that you never see his face can have so much emotion and connection. Like it really is incredible. Like when you're watching it, you can really feel what he's going through, and you never see any expression. I mean, that's his expression right there the entire time, in the whole series. And it's just incredible.
It's one of those like actions speak louder than words kind of situations, which I am sure that the writers really had to take that into account when creating the character. Because if you think about it, he's almost like a magic carpet, where you have a character that has no face to emote with. So his movements, his actions, his everything has to be so expressive that you still feel that emotional connection with him despite not having any of those reference points that we are used to using as a human.
Yeah, and I think for all that, and just one final thing I want to say is, for me personally, I feel like got me hooked into the larger Star Wars universe. Because to your point, we never watched the animated series, any of that sort of stuff. I'd only ever seen the movies, but seeing The Mandalorian, it's got me more excited of like, okay, who's Bo-Katan? Who are these people? What's Mandalorian? And then it's like, okay, we need to know about the Darksaber. So I got to watch the animated series to find out about that. Mm-hmm. And it just, it really tied in to so much of the larger lore.
The Mandalore.
The Mandalore. This is the way. And got me kind of so excited into it. So he's really kind of like a keystone figure, I feel like, for me. So, all right. So moving on to number 2. So we're moving into Marvel now. And we're going with Loki. So for me, I flip-flopped a little bit between Mando and Loki at 2 and 3. I kind of originally had Loki at 3, Mando at 2, and kind of went back and forth. But I feel like Loki has had the best arc in all of the MCU. You know, there is a knock against Marvel of the villains are very one-dimensional. They just have the same powers as the heroes. And it does feel like recently nothing really changes. Like we have these movies, 2 hours of stuff happens, and basically we're at the same spot we started with. You know, obviously up like through Endgame, like that had big ramifications, but since kind of Endgame, it kind of feels like even with the Disney Plus series, not much really happens in them. Like if we didn't have that, and
nothing would change.
Yeah, nothing would change because there's no real growth. But Loki's the exception to that.
Yeah.
He started as the villain, kind of anti-hero. He had redemption through the Thor movies, through Endgame, died, and then they bring him back in the Loki Disney Plus show, and he goes through a second redemption arc because he's now a different version of himself who is still a villain, but then turns into a hero again. And you kind of see this, that he is burdened with glorious purpose of being a hero. And it doesn't matter which version of him, he was always kind of destined to turn and become a hero. And I really feel like Loki season 2, I know you disagree with this. I feel like Loki season 2 was one of, if not the best Disney Plus shows they've done, because there was so much growth, and it tied so much together of him really realizing that I care about these people. All I've been really missing is a family. That's what I want, and I will do anything to make sure my friends and family are safe. And he kind of makes that ultimate sacrifice of, I will be the one to, again, be burdened with holding the multiverse together, knowing that I may never see these people again, but that's okay because I know that they are safe. And that's such a massive change from Thor 1 and 2, when he is impersonating Odin to be king of Asgard and trying to get rid of Thor. And he's doing everything for himself, to now being the most selfless character in the MCU. And again, just the biggest change out of the entire MCU.
I'm going to make the argument that you made with Anakin and Darth Vader. They're not the same character, brah. Maybe he just doesn't like spaghetti. Maybe that's his problem, and that's why he makes all that change, because he doesn't like spaghettification.
Could be. All right, well, I mean, I would even say, even if you just take the Loki on the Disney Plus show, he had, I feel like, more of an arc over 2 seasons there than most of the MCU characters. So if you want to say, hey, those are 2 different versions of Loki, I'll just pick the Loki on the Disney Plus show and still say he's better than 90% of the other characters.
I see a lot of parallels between him and Anakin, where it's just like you have so much information to work with because he is a character that is so beloved, that they kind of kept bringing him back in different iterations, that he's hard not to love. I think that is a super solid pick. Like, yeah. Loki never came to mind, but he is probably one of my favorite sleeper picks, like MCU characters. 'Cause I don't think of him as a hero, but you're right, he is.
Yeah, I think the one thing with Anakin, you're right, they've done a lot through the animated series and through the Ahsoka live action of building out Anakin's backstory, but I feel like the one kind of downside is his redemption after he turns into Darth Vader is very limited, because that was from the original movies, and obviously he does do the right thing in the end, but then he dies very quickly. Like, he doesn't have a super solid redemption, and then Palpatine lives anyways, which I think is part of the problem with, like I mentioned when I was talking about the Disney sequels. It's kind of like you bring Palpatine back, and so now you've just undone Anakin's sacrifice. You know, you've undone the good he did from the movies, and it's like, was that really necessary? And so his redemption story,
Hey.
I feel like isn't as strong.
Have you ever heard the tale of Darth Plagueis? let me try that one again. Have you ever heard the tale of I can't say it. Have you ever heard the tale of Darth Plagueis?
I know, right? I know, but so that's the thing. So Loki, again, obviously, I feel like has a more solid redemption. Now they could screw it up. I mean, there's still more MCU to happen, so it could all get undone.
Maybe
I'm sure,
a third version. Maybe the alligator version.
No, I'm sure he'll come back in like Secret Wars, the whole multiversal thing. I'm sure he'll play a role in it. I don't think he's going to ruin his redemption, but I feel like that is the one thing. Like if they could go back and kind of just give Darth Vader a stronger redemption, that really would tie Anakin's story in really, really well. I think they're starting to do that now of, hey, Anakin's a Force ghost, like in Ahsoka, helping. And so it's like, to your point, this was the Force's will the whole time. And so he was Darth Vader, but now he's
it doesn't
redeemed.
matter about the younglings.
Yeah, he's redeemed post-death, kind of. You know, like
Yeah.
that. They're kind of doing that stronger. So, but Loki's not my number one choice. My number one choice is the genie. So I've talked about the genie a ton. I feel like
Genie Plus.
I feel not Genie Plus, no, the genie. I feel like the genie is the best Disney character because he works on any medium. Aladdin, the movie, the genie's the best character in it.
Yes.
There's a Broadway show, the genie's the best character in it.
Yes.
On the cruise ships where they have kind of the mini Broadway shows, the genie's the best character on it. Like
yes.
every aspect of it.
The live action movie.
Yeah, okay. But the genie's still a lot of fun. Like the songs, the character, like the way Robin Williams brought that character to life in the original Aladdin, and then how they just take that ethos and everything else they do with the genie and how it just works. And for me, like when we went on the cruise, it kind of reminded me how much I like the genie because we got there like, they're going to do Aladdin. And I'm like, we've seen Aladdin before. Like I've seen the movie. They do it all the time. Aladdin is in just like everything in the theme parks. We've seen the movie. We've seen the Broadway show. Like enough, right? This is not going to be that great. And then it comes out and the genie comes out and it's a fresh take on it. He's irreverent. He knows he's the genie. He knows about all the other Disney princesses and stuff. Like he
calls out that Abu is not present.
Yeah, like he's making other references. And then you're immediately like, that was incredible.
Yeah.
Why did I ever doubt that this was going to be amazing? Like every single time the genie is involved in something, it is absolutely incredible. Like it never gets old. And I feel like when you can go into something and being like, I don't think this is going to be good. I really don't want to see this, and come out of it of like, that was one of the best things I've ever seen because of this character. How can you not have that character be number one?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really solid list that you have going there. I think that for me, if out of your 5, I would probably put Loki as number 1. I actually think that
I think you can make an argument for Loki being number 1.
I think Loki out of all of the MCU, and like I wouldn't even think about it. Like if you asked me my favorite character out of the MCU, I'd tell you Thor. But Thor, I feel like, is so good because of Loki.
If we're playing your game, we'll just do Thor and Loki.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think Loki is maybe my number 1. I think you have great reasons for Mando, but I think you're right as far as Genie just being so iconic that I would probably put him at number 2. And then I'd probably keep, the order, the rest of them the same. Like I think Mando, Chippendale, and Alan Tudyk was not a character.
Alan Tudyk's on there. I think the one thing they need to do for the genie is in the parks. I think they need to create some sort of kind of like how Universal has with Donkey, where it's an animatronic, but there's somebody voicing it so he can interact with you and crack jokes and say things. They need to do something like that with Genie, where it's not just a character that can't talk. Like you need to have that dynamic conversation with the genie, making jokes, laughing, being larger than life. Like they need to figure something out to make that a better character in the parks.
And I think that the character itself, there's something a little off about it, like the appearance of it.
They almost need like a turtle talk with Crush for Genie. Like they need to do something like that where you can interact with Genie, because that's the magic of the Genie. Like just getting a picture with them, not that great, but that magic, that interaction is where you are. So, all right. So those are our top 5 lists. Would love to hear what our listeners have as their top 5. If you're listening to this, you can message us on Instagram. We're at Enchanted Ears Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, just let us know in the comments what you agree, disagree with our list, what your top 5 characters are. We'd love to hear them. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.